1 week to go. We are rounding third. We're heading for home. We're brown-eyed, handsome men, and this is the Low Post Podcast. I'm Dan Ruggiero. I am joined by PJ Thomas. We got a lot of action to get into, so I just want to see, Pete, how are you feeling before we begin?
As you can see, I'm in my zone after locking up the 1 seed. I had a big hand in that. They say I'm the sleeper on the bench, so you never know. But feeling good. Duje's boys are right at the top where we should be, where we belong, and I think it's what's the Thanos quote in the Avengers? Everything's balanced, something like that.
Perfectly balanced as all things should be.
That's how it feels. So I'm feeling good.
All right. Indeed it is. And it's going to be a great cap off to the season, but we'll get to that later. As far as week 7 action goes, I want to start with the double header on the night. Ozone and the 18ers both had a game to make up. So they played at 7:00, took an hour off, and they played each other at 9:00. And it was a pretty interesting storyline, if you ask me. I think we were saying last week, best case scenario for Ozone was they end the week at 3-4. They go 2-0 on the night, but we didn't think that was going to happen because they were going against Lob. And it did happen. So let's talk about the first game. We had Ozone taking down Lob in a very low-scoring affair for both games. Final score was 54-48 in Ozone's favor. It was Paul McGuire leading the way for Ozone, Cody and Colin putting up all the work for Lob. So, PJ, what do you have to say to start it off?
Well, I think you can take a little bit of a look at the roster situation, as we've come to talk about more when we said the Werewolves had the attendance problem, and now it was kind of shifting to Lob having the attendance problem, right? Rumbling is that Jose Mercado is not returning this season, but they also said that about Vic, and then Vic came back for a week, so who knows? Doesn't really matter. A win is a win, and I'm sure the Ozone boys will take it any way that they can. I think without their 2 primary facilitators, it's been difficult for them without Vic and without Jose. They need to find a guy that can really facilitate the offense. Looking through Cody Crawford or Colin Burns is sufficient for now. I don't know if that's long lasting. You can see in the assist numbers, nobody with more than 2 assists throughout the night. That's not going to cut it. You need a facilitator out there. You need a guy that can give you at least 5 assists a game or more. And they just don't really necessarily have that. I mean, you have Luke Hogan getting 3 assists. The assist numbers are the same, which I'm a little bit surprised about because Ozone does a good job moving the ball. But, I think Ozone is all facilitators, and Lob, they're lacking that facilitator right now. So that's the difference. But, credit where credit's due. Ozone got the win. They don't care who shows up. They can only play the guys that are in front of them. And they did what they needed to do on the night in order to, move up in the standings.
Yeah, it's definitely something thinking about it. If you don't have someone like Vic showing up, because we knew that his attendance was spotty for a few weeks and everyone was like, where's he been? You could have still won because you had guys like Cody and Colin kind of playing the secondary roles, and Jose was kind of the main guy. But now, if the rumor mill is true and Jose is now nowhere to be found for the rest of the year, and you're kind of relying on Cody and Colin to be the main options again, I don't want to say that Cody's over the hill, because he still puts out great games here and there. He still hits a lot of shots here and there. He's still a great guy to have on your team. But I think that the days of him putting up like 30 points or even 45 on his best nights are kind of behind him. He's going to be in that like 15 to 25 range now. So it's just a matter of they kind of got beat at their own game. It seems it was like a defensive battle, but where their strength is, Ozone kind of overtook them at some points.
Well, we've also always referred to Ozone as Lob Jr. That's been the name that we kind of gave them, for a while now. So I'm not surprised they were able to do that. But to touch on the Cody Crawford bit, I would agree that he's not over the hill, but to quote Kate Bush, her song's getting popular. He's definitely running up the hill for sure. He's getting there, but he's still a good guy to have in your team. I just don't know if he's your number 1 option to win a championship. Look, Lob has won every championship in this league except for one. We all know who won that year, but I mean, I just don't know if he's the number one option on a championship caliber team. Definitely can't count them out ever, no matter who the hell shows up for them. So sucks that they lost, and now their floor is actually being fallen all the way to the 5 seed. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I don't think Lob's ever been lower than a 2 seed ever, ending the regular season. So the only time that they were ever a 2 seed was last year when we were the 1. Because we had an undefeated season last year. So
actually, no, they were the 2 summer 19 because Boom was the number 1 seed.
Oh,
That
that's
Boom
right.
Shakalaka had Jose.
But my point still holds true. They've never been lower than a 2 seed, I don't believe. So
I don't think so.
Yeah. So looking at that, staring down potentially being a 5 seed for them, I don't want to see them as the 5 seed for sure. But I'm sure that's not where they want to be either. They don't want to have to face one of the top teams in the first 2 rounds, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm. And then moving on to the second half of the game ones, the 7:00 matchups, the Warriors taking down the 18ers. I feel really bad for the 18ers because it feels like they're so close to putting the pieces together against some of these teams. They had 2 really, really good games, and I think the second game of the night for them this week, they didn't really fall apart. It just came down to some tough luck at the end. But this first game, I feel really bad because they fell apart in the fourth quarter and they didn't have any subs this game. So this first game, the Warriors bounce back after a bogey kick scare in week 6, and they win by 20, fueled by a huge 24-point win in the fourth quarter. They win 98-78. And if you look at the box score, Gian and Charles could have just showed up, just the 2 of them, and they would have won.
Yeah, which is crazy. I think Gian put up another 50 ball, right? That was
52, and it was a lot more efficient than last week's 50 ball.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. We keep saying that he can't do it alone, but I mean, we're getting proved wrong again and again. So he can do it on his own. Him and Charles can do it. So I'm not going to even say that they can't no more because
we were saying the one thing they needed outside of Gian was for Charles to show up and be game ready, and he was game ready. I tell you, I mean, just look at the production you're getting out of the 2 of them.
I'll say it again. Charles Correa, for those of you who don't know, player of the decade over David Duke. So that's no joke. Kid can ball when he's game ready. When he's in the right headspace to play some basketball, he's a monster. So, I mean, we've seen this before. We've seen, Brian Heston and Dave Campbell do the same thing. We've seen Johnny Kutu and Vinny do the same thing, so you can do it with 2 guys. Clearly they can. And especially when you have a kid that's the talent of Gian, I mean, what do you say? You can do it. So, they're going to be fine the rest of the way. Scary team for anyone they got to face in the playoffs. Mike Hamilton dropping 31 points and Stephen Ritchie with 22. Jason Madwid, is that how you say his name?
Yeah, Jason. That's a guy that I wish he showed up more for them because maybe they might win their game against only the fam. And then maybe if they find, I think there were a couple other close matchups they had this year, but he's one of those guys that his attendance has been kind of spotty and you kind of wish that he had shown up more. And I think we were saying last week, the 3-point performance they had in their last game, their last loss, was pitiful. And it was a lot better. I mean, with the exception of Ethan Cloutier, however we're pronouncing it. He was 0 for 10. Yeah. We're going to get into him a little bit because it was kind of a tale of 2 games for him. But I mean, they made an improvement from 3, but I think some of their guys like Brendan Reddington, who's another one of their top scorers, he wasn't there for this first game either.
So I think Lincoln has shown flashes of being capable of winning games. You're right. I do kind of feel bad. I think they're just kind of caught in the crossfire here of playing some good teams who know what they're doing. And I think they're going to be fine. They're going to have a tough first round matchup. Actually, the way that it's set right now, they're them or only the fam is playing against us in their second game. So, they had a good game against us, and if they make it to that part of the playoffs, we look forward to playing them again. So,
yeah, Joey has alluded to it, and we're gonna cover it a little bit later. But I think the 1 seed has been locked up, and then that 8, 9, 10 has also been locked up. That middle pack is where it's still a little wonky, but we'll talk about that later. And then capping off the doubleheader in the 9 o'clock, the West Coast prime time. Well, maybe a little bit earlier than the West Coast prime time.
The nightcap game.
Yeah, it was the Lincoln 18ers and the Ozone boys, and this one went down to the wire. It was final score 72-69. I'm going to pull up the box score right here because I was just mentioning how it was a tale of two games for the Clout Man. Just take a look at this. You go from 6 points, 0 for 10 from 3 in the first game, and then you're the leading scorer, you're dropping 30 in the next game. I mean,
it happens.
Yeah, they did get a sub for this game. Ryan Musket did show up for this one.
Yeah, so they got Ryan Musket back for this game, but the Ozone boys got Andrew Kavang back for this game too. So, I
yeah, because he wasn't in the Lob game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I think the Clout Man showed up for game 2. He just probably needed to take the lid off the bucket in the first game, and it was very efficient, 66% shooting from 3, 68 on the night. And he was 6s across the board, actually, if you look at it. So, no, he played well, and I think it's unfortunate that they took the loss here, but good for Ozone. So we knew that game was going to be kind of a little bit of a closer game. But, credit to them. They kept it close. They kept it interesting, and, we'll see what they do from here in the playoffs.
All right, we're going to move on to.
They better get used to playing 2 games in a night, though, because that's going to.
Yeah, I know that those 2 of those 4 teams at the bottom end of the playoff seeding, they're going to have to play 2 games. So, all right, I'm going to move on to kind of one of the constant bloodbath that is happening in Legacy Leagues basketball. That's only the fam. I was telling PJ before we started this podcast, there have been 7 regular season weeks, and only the fam has given up the week high in points in 5 of them. And they've done it again. Sin City takes them down 102-63. Devin Devon Pina, as always, leading the way for Sin City. It's 37 points, 25 rebounds, 10 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals. Taj Addington also dropping over 30 points. He had 31. Pete, I want to know what you have to say.
Well, you're a pretty big fan of Devin Devon Pina, so I think that he's their guy, and as long as they can run through him, they're going to be fine. Sin City is going to have a chance here to move up in the standings with a Lob loss and a few other teams' losses. But, I think they're probably a middle of the pack team. But, if things get a little bit wonky, we can see them kind of move around after this week. But, whoever they play week 1 is going to have a tough matchup, week 1 of the playoffs. So, they're not going to be an easy out. We know what they can give everybody on a good night, and we'll see how they do from there. But they got our boy Jerry back. Jerry's balling for them. We love Jerry. And I think they're going to do some good things from here on out. Definitely a good team, especially with having a lot of new guys to the league, like a lot of guys who are relatively new to the league. So they're adjusting well and they're doing a good job. So I'm excited to see how they do.
And then you look at only the fam. What I wonder is,
do they
Jaron Thomas do they care? But Jaron Thomas has kind of slumped these last few weeks after having a really great first couple weeks playing in the Legacy Leagues. And then it seems like he's kind of come to a standstill. He's playing like a tier below. We'll see that. I mean, we got Sin City stats right here, but look at this. I mean,
shout out to Garen Megadichian, 8 points. That's our boy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Garen Megadichian, 8 points off the bench. Cranston guy through and through. Went to elementary school with him. Greatest kid on the planet.
We love Garen at the Duje boys. So,
but I mean, you wonder what only the fam would be doing if they weren't just chucking up threes and not getting back on defense. Because, granted, they shoot the ball a lot. But that's because they give up so many points that they get a lot of possessions coming back the other way.
Yep. No, I mean, we talked about that, and I'm sure we'll get into the statistics part of it a little bit later. But their weakness is defense. They don't have the greatest defensive efficiency rating. If I had to take a wild guess, it just seems like they're giving up. Look, you said they gave up the week high in 5 of the 7 weeks. Well, they've won 2 games, so I can tell you which 2 weeks it wasn't. It was the first 2 weeks of the season.
It was. And you know who gave up the league high those 2 weeks?
Bogy kicks.
No, the Rhode Island Warriors, who only the fan faces in week 8.
Wow. So, it should be interesting. I don't see them beating the Warriors in week 8. I think the Warriors are too good. But they have some pieces that they can definitely build on. Look, they're not the basket hounds of old, for sure. But they got to improve defensively. You can't win game. Defense wins championships, and that's something my dad's always said. It's a very cliche old headline, but it's true. I mean, you can't. If you put up 100 points and the other team's putting up 101, you're gonna lose. So as obvious as a statement that is, you just can't let teams put up triple digits on you. So I don't know. They baffle me sometimes, and then you see flashes and you're like, oh, are they going to turn around? But until they start playing defense, I just don't know what the outlook is for them.
Yeah, exactly. We were saying they get the Warriors, and then I think, their playoff matchup will be locked up, and they get the 18ers, and that's another one where you're like, I mean, they won the first time they met, but it could go the other way this time.
Let me tell you something. If they don't play defense against the 18ers and squeak out a win, they better play defense in their second game, because if a team doesn't want to play defense against us, we'll have a fun time. It'll be a blast.
Sticking with the theme of the Duje's boys, I want to cover this game now. I will give Joey his due diligence and put the game of the week last. We'll spend some time on that. But the Duje's boys take down the Bogy Kicks. They clinch the 1 seed, and we had alluded to it. You didn't even need to beat the Bogy Kicks to get the 1 seed because of the Lob City loss at 7:00. But regardless, Duje's boys are 7-0. Bogy Kicks are now 0-7. We set the 25-point spread, and Shane had said in his interview that big spreads like that are very tricky. And I wonder if it was kind of a case of like underestimating the opponent and kind of just getting a little lazy lackadaisical out there, because it ends up being a 7-point win.
Yeah, I mean,
I boys think going 71-64.
I think not Devin Devon Pina, but David Dupina is much better than we thought he was going to be. I know there was a lot of crap talk that happened in this game.
You can say shit talking. It's okay.
Well, I know Joey likes to keep it PG, but we
can keep it like PG-13.
So putting all the shit talk aside, to give people credit where they deserve it. David Dupina can score. It's really good. I mean, he's was arguably one of the best players on the court, 2 nights ago. So I would never take that away from him. I think he's a talent for sure. But again, I mean, they had Mike Evans, I believe, is their other guy that scored a lot of points. And, he can shoot the ball pretty well. He's not too bad out there. He's a big dude, but he actually facilitates the offense pretty decently for them and is able to get his guys open. I think it might have just been, with all the shit talk going on, that we were a little bit more focused on that and kind of proving a point. At the end of the day, it's just all ball talk. As I've said a million times, when teams get frustrated with us, it doesn't really mean much at the end of the day. And it's unfortunate that, teams do get upset with that, but we're all good guys. Everyone cares about each other, and ask the Werewolves, because there's nobody that's taken more of a beating from us than them. And we're pretty cool with them. And it's going to be a fine game next week. There probably won't be much crap talk at all. And it's just a respect thing. And I think they're kind of learning the league there. If they decide to come back next year, they'll probably have a good chance to get a win, but I definitely don't see it next week against Ozone. And I probably don't see it in the first round of the playoffs either. So, it's just, it's unfortunate because they do have some pieces, but, I think we all kind of figured that it was going to end up this way, with them being probably 0-8 as an outlook, and then, bumping out first round of the playoffs.
I will say, with Mike Evans, you had put the stream up, and looking at the numbers, he was 5 for 15 from 3, but I don't know. I think you had mentioned this, like when the Duje's boys played the halfway Crooks, and you said that Jared Hansen only hit like 3 threes, but it felt like he had 9 of them. Excuse me. It felt like Mike Evans like shot the lights out of the gym. It felt like every shot he put up went in. And looking at the numbers, I'm like, really? It was only 5 for 15? That's crazy. But
yeah, I mean, he's pretty good. He's very light on his feet for being a big dude. Moves with the ball well. So I agree. It felt like he hit like 10 threes. He was hitting some big ones, some clutch ones, and Other guys out there were hitting some shots. So, and then when you have a guy like David DePina down low getting the offensive boards and putting them right back up, it's tough. He's an athlete. I mean, it's not easy to guard a guy like that. Not that I would ever be matched up with a guy like that, but I'm if Johnny and Vinny had a tough time guarding him, then he's a good athlete, So those are two of the best defenders in the league, in my opinion, even though we couldn't vote for him on our All-Star ballots. I think that he's clearly a talent if he's able to score on those guys. And, they have some pieces. They just got to build around it. I think a team chemistry thing is something for them to work on for next season, but, that's not my place to say anything. But, I think they definitely have spots to improve, and we'll see what they do for next year. But I think that's where the outlook has to be. The outlook has to be for next year at this point.
At this point, and I mean, who knows what they're going to do next year? I mean, we had teams like the Pizza Rolls that come through and they don't win a game in a season, and they're too shell shocked and they don't come back. So I mean, we'll see what happens. But
there will be a team worse game. There will be a team worse than them next year. Promise.
Oh, you think?
There's always one.
What do you think? David DePina is gonna go elsewhere and just leave the remainder of the bogey kicks?
He'll take Jose's spot.
Oh yeah, I think that's the most likely destination, if you ask me. Moving on to our game of the week. As far as the spreads that we set last week, I think that this has to be the best one we set. Which, for context, we went 3-3 on the spreads. I think the Ozone boys, the Duje's boys, and the Ozone boys were the three that did not cover. Everything else did. This one, I think we gave the best insight to. Werewolves, halfway Crooks, storied matchup. It's a tough defensive match, but the Werewolves squeak it out 68-62. Brian does not have a fantastic game. He only has 10 points, which is very un-Brian of him. But that doesn't matter because he has what has kind of become the unicorn of legacy leagues showed up, Sam Clifford. He's only been there for 3 games, but in the 3 games that he has showed up, he has, I don't know if stunned is the right word, but I think he's been the leading scorer in all 3 games that he's shown up. So he essentially puts the team on his back because Brian was like having an off night, I guess.
Probably
carries the Werewolves to this. Yeah. Carries the Werewolves to the 6-point win. So,
when the big red dog decides to show his teeth, it's tough for any team to overcome that. But, I think he's a pretty good player. Clearly, the interns think that, the Duje's boys are unable to handle the Werewolves at all. So we'll get to that a little bit later. I'm a little bit pissed,
we'll cover that.
But he's a good player. I don't really know him too well. I know what Brian Heston can do. So that's the guy I'm focusing on. And if I'm the halfway Crooks, I'm living with anybody but Brian Heston beating us, even if it's Sam Clifford. Doesn't matter. I don't care who it is. You can't let Brian Heston beat you, and he didn't. And so at the end of the day,
you let Sam Clifford beat you.
At the end of the day, you pat yourselves on the back and say, Sam Clifford beat us.
Yeah, and then touching on the points that I had made on the podcast last week, and then some of the things that Joey said this week. Jared Hansen notches his 1,000th career point in this game. Brian Heston notches his 1,500th career point. Gino is still, I believe, 11 points shy of the 1,000, so it looks like he'll get that week 8, I'd imagine. But nice little bounce back game for Jeff Winchell as well. He kind of laid an egg in their game against Lob City. And he puts up a double-double, 3 blocks. Nice.
Yeah, no, I think halfway's they're struggling to get some wins, but it's not like they're falling off completely. I don't think they're trending downward, as the interns wanted to say. They're just running into some tough teams here. They had an easier schedule to start, and now they have a tougher schedule. That's just kind of how it shakes out. We figured they'd probably be a relatively middle of the pack team. At the beginning of the year, and that's where they ended up. So they're fighting to stay in that 7 spot. Potentially, I think the 5 is their ceiling, but who knows? I think they're a good team. They're going to be a tough out in the playoffs. I know I keep saying that, but that whole middle of the pack is like all the same team to me in my head. So, they're all relatively pretty equally matched, and, we'll see how it shakes out after this week.
All right. That was a relatively loaded week 7. That was 6 games on the slate, and it feels like we got through those fairly quickly. But we're going to take a look at week 8 now. We'll start with 7 p.m. It is the Ozone boys against the Bogy Kicks.
Ozone boys.
Yeah, there's a lot on the line here. For Ozone boys, it's can you get to 500? And for the Bogy Kicks, it's can you lose 8 straight games?
Yeah. Do we have to really say why we think the Ozone boys are going to win this one, or
I think it goes without saying. I think the last couple of weeks we've done these forecasts. We spend very minimal time on the Bogy Kicks games. We literally just go other team and we move right on. But
yeah, no, I mean,
I'm going to set it at 10.5.
Hey, I do have a message for the Bogy Kicks though.
What is your message, Pete?
My message to the Bogy Kicks is, if you thought the trash talk against the Duje's boys was a tough time, I promise you the Ozone boys won't be any easier on you, because they're just as witty. They're young, and they are children. They don't have any, so they know how to make some good jokes, and it should be a good time.
Yeah, you can leave everything on the table and know that you're going to be able to walk out of the gym a free man. But I think you made a good point there. They're very witty. I think their play style is very similar to a young Lob. I think their trash talk style is very similar to a young Duje's boys, a young Shane Patrick and Brian Yars, would you?
Yes.
But I was saying before, then we got into that little speech there. I'm going to set it at 10.5 because we've gotten into a habit of fading Bogy by 25 points the last 2 weeks, and it has not worked out 2 weeks in a row. So I think, why don't we play it a little safe and let the Ozone boys do their thing? Because the last time we set a spread really lightly against the Ozone boys and a bad team, they won by 60. So let's keep that juju going. Let's do a little bit more of that.
We're rooting for you, Ozone.
All right. The other 7 p.m. game, we've got 2-5 only the fam and the 5-2 Warriors. And this is another one where I don't know how much there is to be said. I don't know how much there is to be said about pre-game analysis here. I guess the big thing is, do you think Gian goes for a third straight week of 50 points?
Yes. And that's saying a lot. I think he says, see if I can get 60 tonight when he walks into the gym.
I think the record is 62. You think he wants to go for the record?
Well, I heard that there's someone else going for the record week 8, but
yeah, there is, and we'll talk about that. We know there's a few records that are trying to be broken, but I mean, the way I see it, I was saying before, only the fam has given up the most points each week, 5 of the 7 weeks of this regular season. So if I'm looking at it, I think there's going to be enough possessions in this game that Gian could realistically, if he plays to the level he's played the last 2 weeks, he could realistically get 60 points or more.
I think he can. I think he's good enough to do that.
So then this is a game that I don't feel bad about setting the high spread because it's only the fam. I'm going to set it at 19.5.
I like it.
Okay. That's fair.
Gian goes for 60. Book it. Bet the house.
Then we got 2 8 p.m. games. I'm going to save one of them to the end because it's my pick for game of the week for obvious reasons. Actually, this one could be Joey's pick of the week. 8 p.m. 4-2 versus 5-2. A couple weeks ago, we had the Duje's boys versus the Ozone boys, and we affectionately called it the Boy Bowl.
Oh, I know you're going with
8 p.m. during week 8. You've got the City Bowl. You've got
City Showdown.
City against
the City
Lob
Showdown.
City. The City's going to break your heart. So,
Hey.
Pete, I want to know, which city are you favoring and which city has the keys to the kingdom?
How do you bet against a team that's won every championship in the league except for one? They're the superior. I think right now Lob City is a superior city. Rumbling is that Devin Devon Pino won't be there for Sin City. I guess Sin City just wasn't made for him. But no, he won't be there. He's probably on vacation or something, or hanging out with his twin brothers, Marcus and Markeith. I think I'm going to take Lob City here by 8.5.
I think that's pretty good, but I think without Devin Devon Pina, I think it might be a little bit bigger than that.
You're right, but they are.
So I'm also
predicting no Jose and no Vic.
Yeah, but even still, without Jose and Vic, I think it's a double-digit win. I think it's 11.5.
I'll take 10
Actually,
and a half.
You know what? We'll go 9.5. 9.5. Because Taj has been a good second option. I think a guy like Javon Morris, if he steps up and takes more shots, could be a good other option.
The milkman. You got the milkman.
The milkman always delivers.
Justin Titsworth.
Rumor has it. Yeah. that is good.
He always delivers.
So we said what, 9.5?
Yeah, 9.5.
Okay, 9.5 for the city of Lob in the City Bowl. At 9 p.m., we have the 18ers and the halfway Crooks.
You got to take halfway here. I think you have to. If all goes chalk, I mean, it should be halfway. I don't really see much of a competition in this game, but you never know. Lincoln 18ers could shock the world, and I think halfway would be super pissed if they lose this game, because that would mean a lot for their standings. I'm still going to take halfway here by, I want to say like 8.5, 9.5 points this week. I just think Spence and Jared and Jeff Winchell are a little too much for them to handle.
Yeah, I think, as you just said, I think the best players on halfway, the Jareds, the Spences, the Jeffs, might be a little bit too much for the 18ers to stop. The thing with the 18ers is that I would love to see what this game looks like if they come out and play like they did in that second game against Ozone. But maybe like if you could play like that, but have some more of your guys, like get Brendan Reddington there for the game because he wasn't there, and I think he's averaging like 13 for them. I would love to see what it looks like if it's full strength 18ers and they're playing like they did in both games this past week, with the exception of that fourth quarter against the Warriors.
Right. No, I think they have some firepower. Like I said, I just think it's going to be too much to handle with the Jays and Spence. The Jays, that includes Joey now. He dropped almost a triple-double, so he's in the Jays. He's in the trio of Jays.
We're not going to let him forget that. Wasn't he player of the week one week a few years ago?
Joey might have been.
I think there was another game like that where they threw him in. He started because they didn't have a lot of guys show up, and he put up like a triple-double or something, or hit like 8 threes or something. He was player of the week.
Yeah, I think he might have swung the votes a little bit in his direction, but it's okay. He deserves it.
Yeah, that was back when you could have unlimited votes for player of the week. So
that was like if I started in week 8 against the Werewolves and dropped 45 points, you'd be like, oh, okay.
See, it's funny that you mentioned starting against the Werewolves and dropping 45 points, because this is a good segue into our pick for game of the week. A storied matchup. You want to talk about halfway in the Werewolves? Let's talk about the Twitter battle that ensued in, what was it, December of 2018, really.
Yeah.
December of 2018, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Duje's boys make a Twitter account, and they get their first schedule for the Legacy Leagues, and they see, oh, we're playing these schmucks, the Werewolves, week 1. Let's just start a Twitter battle with them. And we lose by 20 that first week. We've come a long way since then. It's a storied battle. We look forward to it every year. The 8 p.m. time slot, it's the Duje's boys and the Werewolves. And it's a special one, Pete. Do you want to tell them why it's a special one?
It's a special one because we, in place of Anthony Verducci being on vacation, we were granted permission by Commissioner of the League, Mr. Joey Zacco himself, to have a special guest play for us, come out of retirement for one night only, selling tickets to the event, $40 a pop. It's going to be on pay-per-view, $60 a pop wherever you get your pay-per-views. Mr. Daniel Joseph Ruggiero himself is making a return.
I gotta ask you, why is it cheaper to go to the game than it is to buy the pay-per-view?
Because you got to go to Johnston.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yes, very excited. I didn't even get to play the full season last year. Some say that I was the missing piece to that finals run last year, and the reason we lost to Lob City was because I was not there. I was only able to play 4 games last year, and then I moved to, start my my medical career
as a doctor of the toe.
Exactly, doctor of the foot. But I'm coming back for a week before school starts next week, and I am more than excited to be back. And because the 1 seed is locked up, you and I are starting.
Yeah. So I know that I'm going to take a second to say this. This is my time for my
take your
rant.
time. Take your time.
The interns, this is my message to you. If you ever pick against the Duje's boys again, I'm going to tell you that it's a bad idea. And here's why. Danny and I were talking. Last time the Duje's boys have lost a game, besides the championship against Lob City last year, without Vinny and Johnny, after having an undefeated season, the last time the Duje's boys have lost a game was the summer of 2019 against the Ozone boys. We're running on 3 years here that the Duje's boys have one loss in 3 years. So for you to sit there and tell us that we can't guard Brian Heston, I love Brian Heston. I play with Brian Heston when the Legacy Leagues isn't going. I invite him and we all hoop together. He's a great dude. Love Brian. I've played against Brian 4 times. If there's anybody in the league that knows how to play against Brian, it's us and Lob. So, I don't quite understand picking the Werewolves. Little did you know that it's probably a good pick this week because, as I said, Danny's returning. He's probably playing 40 minutes unless his leg falls off. And in that case, so he's a doctor. He can help himself. But, with the 1 seed locked up, I wouldn't look too much into this game. But come playoff time, if we got to play the Werewolves, I don't pick against the Duje's boys ever again. That's my rant for the day.
To the interns' point, and I'm not going to fault them. There are always some things.
Them.
No, because here's the thing. There's even sometimes that we have to get on Joey for his Legacy Leagues history, right?
Fair.
Hang on, I got to silence my phone. It's blowing up for some reason.
You're popular. It's all the Legacy Leagues guys telling you they can't wait to have you back next week.
Yeah. We have to get on Joey sometimes for his league history. If you're not as well versed with it, it might be tough for you to make the rational thought and make the connection here. Let's bring it back. We've played them 4 times. We lost the first 2. We won the next 2. We're 2-2 all time. This is another rubber match, just like Boy Bowl 3. But I'm going to share my screen and take it right back for you.
I love when you pull up the stats. Love when you pull up the stats.
This is week 1 last year. And might I remind you, this is the year that Brian Heston won the MVP award. And what is that?
26
to 60. And he did. He put up 30, almost 30. And they said, we haven't seen Brian Heston. We've seen Brian Heston in his MVP form. And what is this down here? Dan Ruggiero, 2 for 3 from 3.
And if you remember, Danny audibly screamed in Gino's face after he hit those 2 threes back to back.
Almost the third one too.
What we didn't talk about on that stat sheet is, Dave Campbell being a perennial all-star in the Legacy Leagues had 8 points that game. So doesn't matter who comes across the court. Look, if we can stop Jose, we can stop anybody. And Brian's just as good, if not better. And I love Brian. I love the guys in the Werewolves. We've done a lot of shit talking back and forth, but we really respect each other at this point. We always hang out when we're there at Johnson Rec Center. There's not really any bad blood. They know it's just all in fun. But I will say, as somebody who gets to watch these guys play every week in the Duje's boys and my own team, I don't know if I'm betting against us after only having 1 loss in the last 3 seasons. Now, this week, maybe I'm betting against. I think we might bet against the Duje's boys this week. However,
yeah, we might bet against the Duje's boys this week.
If you're a betting man, I'd probably bet against the Duje's boys this week too. However, they deserve their respect. They're a good team. If we play them in the playoffs, the hero of the playoffs for the Duje's boys against the Werewolves in the year we won the championship was none other than Shane Patrick, to be quite honest with you. He gets a lot of shit. He gets a lot of shit. He hit 5 threes. So, it's always who's going to take that extra step in the playoffs. And that was when the Werewolves had Brian Yars, actually. So, now we have him on the dark side and all is equal and balanced in the world. It's going to be a fun game. It's probably going to be more of a fun game than an interesting game for the guys watching it or the guys playing in it. But, we'll look forward more so to that matchup come playoff time.
Yeah. It's like I said, the only intel we can give you like really solid is the Duje's boys, because we're on the front lines for the Duje's boys. And while I don't want to tell you that we're going to lose this game, and I'm not going to give you the insider trading on the spreads, What I will say is you might want to bet the over on Dan Ruggiero points and PJ Thomas points. I think this is, you and I are going to combine for, what are we going to combine for? We have to set a line for that.
I think I'm averaging less than a point on a game this season. So if you and I combine for more than 15, I'll be shocked.
Let's see it.
I think we can do it.
All right. That's week 8. And what I want to do now, the post-game show had started to talk about this a little bit, some of that playoff seeding. If it all goes based on the way we've favored things and predicted it, you would have the Warriors, Werewolves, and Lob at 6-2. Lob has the win over both of those teams, so they would take the 2 seed. But as far as 3 and 4 goes, I want to talk about this because I just realized this today. And this is a message for Joey, and I'm going to text him about this, make sure he knows. What we've done in the past to break these tiebreakers is use RPI, which, if you don't know, RPI takes into consideration your winning percentage, your opponent's winning percentage, and your opponent's winning percentage.
This is why Danny's a doctor.
Yeah. So you factor that all into play and you weight everything accordingly. But here's the thing. If you are a team in a 10-team league, there are 9 other teams in that league. If there's 8 weeks in the regular season, there's only one team you don't play. For the Warriors and the Werewolves, that one team is both of them. I feel like Brian Windhorst now. I'm doing the, and why is that? The only team that they haven't played is each other. So theoretically, if they finish with the same win-loss record, they've all played the same 7 other teams or 8 other teams. They're going to have the same RPI. So we got to figure out a different kind of metric to break the tie between them if they both finish at 6-2. But I think if you go point differential, which would be points for minus points against, I feel bad for the Warriors because they had this great run after starting 0-2. But those first 2 games, the points they let up, those 2 weeks, that screwed them come playoff time. If it comes down to that, they're going to be the 4 seed and the Werewolves get the 3.
Yeah, which is a tough look. But how else are you going to do it besides RPI? Because RPI is useless in this format, which is the first time I think we've seen RPI being useless in the legacy leagues. Because that's usually,
I think
how
it definitely came into play. It was a lot better of a system. When was it? Summer 19. There were 14 teams in the league.
Played everybody.
Yeah. Well, no, there were 14 teams in the league. So it came into play where there were 9 weeks of the regular season, but there were 14 teams. Not everybody all played the same opponents. So it worked a lot better then, but it has its flaws and it's definitely rearing its ugly head right now. It's like, of all the scenarios where you don't want these 2 teams to have to be tied at the end of it, like they are, but you know, what are you going to do?
No, Joey will ask Danny a way to figure it out. I think, unfortunately, point differential is probably what makes the most sense to do.
Point differential, offensive, defensive rating. I'm crunching the numbers right now. And when we finish this podcast, I'm honestly going to go right back to crunching the numbers.
But I think in reality, no matter how you crunch the numbers, it shakes out that the Werewolves would take that 3 seed.
I think so. It's starting to look like that might be the case.
Which is unfortunate because I think that I wonder what it would be if you have the time, Danny, to do the numbers and eliminate the first 2 games of the season for the Warriors. Because they were just like terrible
what their rating would be.
Correct.
What their RPI would be, or what their defensive rating would be.
Well, what their defensive rating would be, because RPI that's
I actually I can't remember the exact number, but it's so funny because whenever I do the math, figuring out like the score predictions, figuring out the ratings, it's funny when I go through and I have their original points allowed, which gives me their like actual defensive rating. And then I change it and I average it based on the last 5 games instead of the all 7. And it changes. The score predictions change drastically. Like there's some games where it goes from predicting them as like winning by 5 to winning by like 15, just because you change that. And they're technically better defensively than those first 2 games come to show them as.
Right. And I think another interesting thing that we talked about specifically with those numbers is how we've talked about kind of with only the fam to allude to this, that defense wins championships, right? The two teams with the top defensive, is it defensive efficiency or point differential that, no, I think it was defensive efficiency rating, are us and the
Yeah,
Werewolves, us and the Werewolves.
exactly.
So that's interesting to take into consideration here.
And these are, I mean, these are all numbers that these aren't official stats taken by the league. I do the numbers myself because, you know, I'm a purist. I'm a fan. If you want the numbers, I could give you them. We can work that out. I can send you screenshots.
I love it.
But the other storyline that comes into this, because I was just talking about that tiebreaker of the 6-2 teams, is the tiebreaker of what we are predicting to be the 4-4 teams, because you've got 3 teams that are vying for that 5, 6, 7 spot, and one of them is going to have to play 2 games on that first night of the playoffs. And I say 2 games confidently because whoever gets that 7 seed has to play the Bogy Kicks. And I know that regardless of who gets that 7 spot, whether it be halfway Crooks, Sin City, or the Ozone boys, if they all finish 4-4, whoever gets that 7 spot, they're beating the Bogy Kicks.
Right. I agree with you there.
But the thing that I think makes it really interesting is if Devin Devon Pina doesn't show up, I think that Lob City game against the City Bowl, for lack of a better term, if Devin Devon Pina doesn't show up, Sin City might effectively be playing themselves into the 7 seed.
Which would be a matchup against Lob City again.
Yeah, exactly. They would have to play the Bogy Kicks, and then they would immediately an hour later come and play Lob City, which is a tough thing to do.
Yeah, but I mean, who knows what could happen if they do have Devin Devon Pina for the playoffs? That could be a whole different game. So you never really know what could happen. The playoffs are a different game. It's one and done. So any team can beat anyone on any given night. Hell, the Bogy Kicks could win the championship. But I think the day that happens
would be very interesting if they did.
Is the day that hell freezes over. So regardless, my point still stands. Anything can happen. And without Devin Devon Pina, I think they struggle to win this game and put themselves in a weird spot in the 7 seed, but I think they're better than a 7 seed. And if they are in the 7 seed, they're on the other side of the bracket from us. So good luck to them.
The other thing I'd love to see, if it does work out that way and it does end up with the Warriors getting the 4 seed on tiebreakers, that would mean that if they win their first round match, their quarterfinal matchup, and Duje's boys do, we get a rematch of Duje's boys Warriors in the quarterfinals. And that's a matchup that I would really love to see again, because I feel like they were still a little rusty coming into it. And it's a very different Warriors team in week 8 than it was in week 2.
For sure. And no Kevin Figueredo, as we've said. So that changes the looks up a little bit. I think, like I said, whoever we play, it's going to be a good game. We like Gian. So no bad blood there. We recognize the talent that the kid is. So, maybe one day he'll be wearing red, but we'll have to dream about that day further down the road. I mean, he's an absolute stud. And if it gets to that point where we're playing him in the quarterfinals, I think it's going to be a fantastic game. Him, Charles, and Hachi. It's a pretty good big 3 right there. So, I think they can compete with anybody. We definitely won't overlook them. You can't when you have arguably who my vote is for the MVP and Gian. You can never overlook a team with the MVP on the team. So, we'll see how it goes.
Speaking of voting, I think it's a good time. It's a good thing that we close talking about this. Joey has graciously, as host of the podcast, allowed us to vote for the All-Star and end of season awards. We are voting on the teams that we will be drafting for the All-Star game. We are voting for these end of season awards. The only caveat, which I tell you, PJ, we're going to have to go and do some hard campaigning. We're going to have to get on the trail with these interns when I'm in the Johnston Rec Center next week. The only caveat from Joey is that we cannot vote for any Duje's boys because we're biased, apparently.
Which
what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to vote for me to go into the All-Star game? No, I'm going to vote for the ones that deserve it.
I'm an unbiased. which when you shake it down, it's tough to fill out that all-star ballot without any Duje's boys on it.
Yeah, Joey, I mean, it's a good idea in theory, but I'm putting some names. I almost put you down for the All-Star game. No disrespect to you, but
Yeah, that bottom half of our all-star selection list is really difficult without the Duje's boys. I mean, look, you're missing realistically, and I don't think this is biased in the slightest. That's 4 people that should be all-stars from the Duje's boys. And I would say that without argument, they should be, I would say 2 at a very minimum if you're being greedy. But in my opinion, 4, right? I will say Danny and I both did vote for Zach Tartaglia and Vinny Volpe respectively to the dunk contest and 3-point contest, because that's not really an award. And we just want to see Zach dunk because we know he's a freak athlete. So Joey, you can live with that one. But I mean, I think Johnny Kutu should be a lock for the All-Star game. Vinny should be a lock. And in my opinion, I think Zach and Brian are all-stars this year as well. The thing that sucked was not being able, the only Duje's boys I would have given a season award to would have been Brian Yars. I would have given him 5th man of the year. If you
I would have as well.
If you look at the numbers, it's really not even close. He hasn't started a single game all year, and he's averaging what would we say? It was like 13 points or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's 13.
13.
Yeah,
points.
the next closest guy is Mike Wilbur. There's not a lot of guys that meet that 5th man criteria.
You know, and nothing to take away from Mike Wilbur, but Brian Yars is arguably in what the interns and what we believe is the best lineup in the league, the death lineup of the Duje's boys. So for, you know, a guy off the bench to be considered in that, I think it's pretty obvious that he should be 5th man of the year. But hey, if he doesn't win it, credit to whoever does, because they must have did some heavy campaigning for the interns. That would have been our only Duje's boys vote for season award, I think. I think Gian's earned himself the MVP. I think, you know, certain guys, we're not going to have a most improved guy. We have arguably 4 MVPs on the team. You know, from the past or whatever it may be. We always joke and say that, but you know, that's just quite the reality. Vinny already won most improved. He's not going to get much better. Can't. He's already should lock an all-star. You know, no one's going to win rookie of the year. I mean, Kyle Wolf is a great basketball player, but when you have a guy like Jaron Thomas, who's the best player on his team as a rookie, he's probably walking away with that. You know, offensive player of the year. We don't have any guys that are dropping 35 by themselves on a team like Devon Pena, you know, or Gian.
Yeah, there's only 2 guys this year in the league that are averaging over 30 points a game, and it's Gian and Devon Pena.
Yeah, so one of them's got to be offensive player of the year, I think. And as we've said 1,000 times, defensive player of the year isn't even a question. It's almost in the same breath as 5th man of the year for me, with Brian Heston.
You might as well name it after him at this point, because there's only been one. I think there's only been 1 year that he hasn't won it.
Right.
And right. That was who won that? Vic won it like 4 years ago, something like that.
Vic, yeah. So, I mean, look, we would have been pretty unbiased. I think maybe you could consider the all-star selection being biased with having 4 Duje's boys, but season awards, I don't know if voting for Brian Yars for 5th man of the year is biased, but we'll let the interns do their thing. We have our votes. They're locked in. We're not changing them. You know, it is what it is at this point, but I would hope that the interns would take a good look at the things that we've looked at to make our votes. I think we're pretty spot on.
Pete, I want to know, before we wrap it up, if there was no biases, if we look at all-star ballot, if we look at all league first, second, all defensive teams, if we look at any of that, if there was no caveats to your voting, who is somebody that you would include that you don't think other people would, and who is someone that you would exclude that you think everybody else would include? Because I'll tell you mine after you say yours.
From any aspect of the voting, you're saying? Yeah,
somebody that you would throw a vote at that you know nobody else would, or somebody that you would not vote for, or so something that, yeah.
Let's do our who would you throw a vote at that you don't think people are going to throw votes at first, and then we'll do the other one. So mine was actually my most improved player. I gave the vote, and I don't even care if people get mad that we're telling our votes. I know we're probably supposed to keep it quiet, but I don't care. I'm going to say we do the podcast. We make our own rules here. My pick for that was Jared Ganser. Dude's not a stud. And in past years, he's been essentially irrelevant to the Werewolves. Not irrelevant in the sense that like he doesn't matter, but like in terms of like being a guy that you look for on the stat sheet, you don't. Watching him play, I mean, he's throwing behind the head passes. And I even said to Gino last week, when did Jared Gansert become like a facilitator like this? And he goes, I really don't know, like, so he most improved. I threw a vote at him because I think he deserves at least a few votes, whether he wins it or not. This is the most improved is a tough one for the interns to vote on because they don't know. They don't really know that. So that's why
it's the tail of the stat sheet.
It's really the tail of the stat sheet, and it's someone who's
like there's not as much eye test involved with it.
Right. So, you're going to see, oh, well, Brian Yars was an MVP and now he's not scoring as much. He's in a different role, like, so they don't know those certain things. And it's not their fault. They just haven't, we've seen it. We've lived it. So I think Jared Ganser deserves a little bit of a nod or some form of appreciation for being most improved player. He got my vote. Jared, if you're listening, I'll see you next week. I'll tell you to your face, you got my vote. Good job. How about you, Danny?
Somebody that I would include that I don't think others will. I think some people here and there might, but I think they also have a larger pool to select from, which kind of will change things up. I voted for Taj Eddington for all second team.
Taj Eddington, the little guy
from Sin City. I think he's very good, puts up a lot of points, gets some rebounds for a smaller guy. I mean, we've watched him play. He's very good at what he does. And I mean, he kind of gets overshadowed by Devin Devon Pena, but he's a very good player.
I agree. I like Taj. Yeah. I think he's very good. He's a respectable kid. He's a big body for being a little guy. He's a friggin' pit bull, really. He's a dog. So I like him. He's a good player. I agree with that. I want to hear yours first, though, for someone that you would exclude that you believe that others will include.
You're doing it to me. If I could include the Duje's boys in the all-star voting, and I mean this in no disrespectful way, I'm hoping that when I meet you next week, I hope I get to meet you next week, and I hope it's all love.
I know exactly who you're going to say because that's mine as well.
I think I would leave Spence Freeman off the ballot.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I'd give him a dunk contest nod.
I did.
I can't remember if I did. I would give him a dunk contest nod. If we had, what I wish we had? I wish we had an all rookie team.
Oh, he'd be on the all rookie team. That'd be a great
He would
idea.
Absolutely be on the all rookie team. You know what? I might do that and just give it to Joey and be like, do what you want with this.
If we had an all rookie team, he'd definitely be on it. I just don't know if he's the caliber of, he's not on my all first, all second team. For sure. And that's not a knock on him. I just don't think he's a top 8 player in the league. I think I don't think he's the best player on his team. I mean, I have Jeff Winchell in my all second team. So,
I think for all-star game, for the all-star game, what it comes down to is if I'm going to pick 2 guys from your team, I'm picking Jared and Jeff. I'm picking the Jays, as you called them.
Yeah, no. And for sure. And I mean, look, we left 4 names up to chance essentially on our all-star ballots because we couldn't put Johnny, Vinny, Zach, and Brian, who I think should be locks. Interns, do what you want, but I'd be pretty shocked if they don't make it. I mean,
we're gonna do what you want in air quotes because PJ and I will be there next Tuesday to have you do what we want.
Correct. Well, we will force your hand. But I mean, again, it's nothing against him. I actually had a great conversation with Spence about how he's in the Coast Guard. I talked about how I swam a little bit in high school, and we just had a really
it's like the same thing.
Yeah, we just had a very nice conversation. He's a good kid. I really like Spence. Like I said, I wouldn't put him on that. I probably wouldn't have included him on that all-star ballot if we could put the 4 DJs boys. He's on there for me now. But you just have to look across the league. Gian's a lock. Devin Devon Pena's a lock. Jose's not included on it. He doesn't qualify. Vic, same thing. So
yeah, some good guys don't qualify. Jose, Vic, Sam Clifford.
And to be honest with you,
how everything changes up if they do.
Right. And maybe a guy like Brian Yars or Zach Tartaglia gets left off of the All-Star voting if that's the case. I don't think that's the case with them not being eligible. But I mean that I probably agree with you there. That was going to be exactly what I said. So
All right. Well, I think that's just going to about do it. We got one more week before we can really fully start previewing the playoffs, and that's kind of all we get to do. But Pete, I'm excited. I get to come back. I'm going to be there coming this weekend. I get to get some
bright-eyed and
shots up.
bushy-tailed.
Bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I'm going to wear my headband. I'm going to have my knee brace back on. It's going to be a good time. Yeah, we're going to be gooned out to the max. So that's going to do it for this week. Make sure to show up. Make sure to watch the Snapchat. Make sure to say hi to us if you see us in public. And that's all, folks.